And I'm back. And what I'm going to do here today is kind of a different video. It's I'm going to start you off looking at one car. It's a 2004 Volvo XC70. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to work through the process of taking off the intake manifold to get down to the oil separator box, which is this item right here. And then we're going to move on to taking the oil pan off, and I'll explain why we're taking the oil pan off. Okay, and then I discovered some issues with that particular engine. So what I've done is I have another Volvo. I have a 2001 Volvo V70XC. And it's got almost the identical engine in it. It's got a 2.4 liter turbocharged engine. This has a 2.5 turbocharged engine, but the oil pans are the same. The block is almost identical. And what I'm going to do in the second part of the video is I'm going to remove the oil pan from the 2001 V70. And for a reason I'll explain as I do the video. And we'll look at it that way. So it's sort of a combination video. It's all to do with explaining this system. It's part of the PCV system, what happens, why these things plug up, and what some of the maintenance might have to be, you know, if they do get plugged up. Okay, so this video may be a little longer than some of my other ones, but I do want to include all the details for anyone who's interested in taking off the intake manifold to access this separator. Also, I want to include the details about taking the pans off, how to do it, what you'd look for, and all the reinstallation process, and some of the certain specifics for Volvo engines. And we're going to start by looking at the 2004 XC70, and then later in the video we'll be moving over to the 2001 V70XC. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so there's this oil separator. This oil separator, it's mounted down in under the intake manifold right here. There's this pipe that comes in the kit. It's got coolant that runs through one line, and vapor from the crankcase that runs through the other, and then any oil condensates and goes down into here and then runs back into the sump. This is all prone to getting clogged up, so they recommend changing it once in a while. And the best time to do it is when you have to be in under the intake manifold for something else. So that's what I'm going to do. It comes with these another little fitting here and some hose clamps, the whole kit. And I just took that lower intercooler hose off. So that's the hose that comes from the turbo, goes to the intercooler right here. Okay, get that one out of there. And that hose should come up out of there. Okay. When you take off the fuel rail, there's a button you got to push here on the line that comes from the fuel pump. Okay, right there, just pops it off, see? And then this I just had off not too long ago, and so it's all well lubricated, those O-rings, so it pops right out, just like that. There's a 10mm bolt on the dipstick tube. That's going to come off there. Okay, then there's the bolts that hold the manifold to the block. And some of them are easy to get to. There's a couple that are underneath. I was hoping not to have to, but I think I'm going to have to take the power steering pump off. Okay, so I got the power steering pump out of there. And I disconnected the thermostat housing and set that aside. And I was able to loosen that bottom bolt a little bit. I didn't have to take it all the way out because the bottom bolts just sit down over the bolts like that. There's a slot in the bottom of the manifold all along, and so I've got the manifold free here now. And so what I'm going to do next is I got to try and get this intercooler pipe here taken off the intercooler, and then I'm going to disconnect some of this hose and stuff, and then try and lift out the manifold with this pipe connected to it, and that way I can get at the throttle body and everything, because it's mounted from underneath. When I put this other one together on the spring, what I did was I put the manifold in and then tried to hook that up underneath, and it is no fun at all. So I got a different idea here. I'm going to see if this works. It's probably going to work a lot better to take out the manifold with that intercooler pipe. So we're going to try that. It was okay to come off, but then it's a really tight fit, and the rubber gets quite hard on these tubings. But I found that with the air box pulled out of here, and I got down in here with, put 2 hands on this pipe and I pulled it off gently. I sprayed some WD-40 down around here, and then I pulled on it and it popped off. I got it. And I'm just making sure that there's all the connections are pulled off of here. But see, the throttle body comes up with the manifold there at that point, see? And what I'm doing here now is I'm just taking this pipe off the side of the block. It goes down in there. There's a 17mm head on it. There's like a banjo bolt. I'll show you that after. And I think that's probably the way to do this. You know, if you ever had to change the throttle body or the manifold or anything, is to take it out in one piece, not trying to wrestle with that trying to put that throttle body back on there like after the intake manifold's in place. It's that's almost impossible. This isn't any fun, but that's really bad. Okay, so what I ended up doing was cutting this little hose right here, because that comes in the kit. This is part of the assembly, and I just couldn't get it with that in place, and it's going to be easier to get at this end of the pipe with this out of the way. So I got that cut, and now the last thing remaining to do is to disconnect the electrical connector from the throttle body. And it's also brittle, you know, it's all been in the heat for years, so it's I've got it sprayed with some WD-40 and I'm wiggling on it, and it's going to take some time. But most of the plastic, you know, on an engine, after a while, it's just like 20 years old. All the plastic connectors get brittle, so it's inevitable you're going to break something. So I'm just trying to be careful. Okay, so I got the manifold out of there. Got it here all in one piece. There it is. Okay, so I got to get down in here to get at the end of that hose. This one that comes up through here. It's attached down in there, so it's, you know, it's really hard to get at. So what I've decided to do is take off this cross support here, this engine support, with this off, but it's not going to fall. There's other supports that are holding it, but you could put a block under the engine if you're really worried about it dropping down, but it's not going to move while just with this one off. But with this one off and that bracket taken off the top of the engine, I'll be able to access down in there a lot easier. Okay. See how much more room that gives you? Okay, so the end of that hose is right here. This one here, and you can see it's got a factory clamp on it. It's got one of those pinch type clamps on it. So that's probably never been changed. So what I do with these pinch clamps is I just get a pair of side cutters on them like that, and chew at them and pull at it, and they'll either break in half, or like this one unwrapped itself and came out. So got that off of there. Now it's just a matter of pulling this hose off. See, it's this one right here. Just gotta pull this up off that. Gotta be careful, it's plastic. This plastic housing that goes to the turbo. So gotta pull that off of there. And sometimes when these hoses are very hard to come off, what I'll do is, after the clamp is off, I'll just take a knife and really carefully just cut through the hose, not to cut into the spigot that it's sitting on, and then give it a twist, and that'll bring it off. You know, of course I'm not going to be using this hose again, but that's how to get it off. Okay, so I've taken the bolt out of this clamp holding this wiring harness to the side of the block. I lifted it up, and I've also already got the 17mm head on that banjo bolt loosened. So I'm going to pull this out. That should come straight out of there, like that. Okay. There's that hose I just took off. And here's it doubles back on itself. This one here doubles back, and there's a banjo bolt that taps into the cooling jacket on the side of the head right here. Okay, so here's those lines pulled out from inside the block, the oil separator. And now let's get that oil separator off the block. There's two bolts holding it. There's one here, and there's one down here. Hard to see. Okay, so I got both bolts out. One more of those clips over here. There. Clip off of there. That out. Okay. All right. That's it. And you can see, you know, we're going to cut this open and take a look inside, but you can see it's looks like it's clogged up. You know, that hole there in the top. And this is what they're known to do, get plugged up. And look at all the deposits in there. Oh, you can see these passages here. That's the top one. You can see all the deposits in there. And then the bottom one appears to be completely plugged. And that would be the drain back, the oil drain back to the sump. And let me see if I can put a screwdriver in there and see what we can find. Let's see. Let's see here. Look at that. That looks like it's just all hard deposits in there. Look at that. Look at the stuff in there. That's just caked solid, plugged off, completely plugged off. Look at that. Yeah, I can just barely get the screwdriver now in there. It's part of your PCV system. And when that's clogged up, and they're known to clog up on these vehicles, that'll cause running issues. Okay. You can see, you know, the difficulty in getting to it to change it. It's not a 5-minute job. It's a couple hours to get in there and get at this thing and change it, but it's worth doing. Okay, I've been trying to clean out this drain hole from the oil box into the sump, and it's plug solid. So you know, I blew some compressed air in it, and it just backed up on itself. And the other thing I did was I put a glove up here, and I blew some air into this other port, and the glove, you can see the glove moving there. So there's a direct connection between this upper port, you know, that's open through there. But if I do it here, but it's just backing out on me. And I've got a wire. I've got just a piece of 14 gauge wire here, and I've been putting it down in there and working it, and I'm hoping to get to the sump, because you know, if it comes up with clean oil on it, I know I've reached there. But I think that whole tube is plugged, and what I've heard said is if you can't get this free, you're gonna have to take the pan off and clean it. So I don't want to have to take the pan off. So we're gonna work at this. I'm gonna spray it. You know, it may not happen all in one day, but that's the plan. Okay, I've been working this small wire down through the hole back and forth for probably half an hour, and solvents and whatnot, and wiping it off every time it comes out. And then I come up with this idea that a stiffer wire might help. I couldn't find anything. I got this old extension cord cable here, and I got it stuck down there quite a ways. You can see that's about, let me see, that's maybe 6-7 inches, so that must be down into the oil pan. I'm going to run that in there a few times and see if that doesn't sort it out. Wipe that off again, and let's try it. It has to go around there's a kind of a 90-degree bend straight down right after it goes in the hole. I might have to lubricate it a bit. I'm going to put some lubrication in there. Let's see if we can get that to go again. Let's see. Oh, it's jammed up there again about that spot. Let's see. That's, I don't know what's coming up on that. It doesn't look like it's engine oil. Okay, got the vehicle secured. What I'm doing is I'm taking off this splash guard on the bottom here. Access the bottom of the engine. Yeah, not too bad. That's the bottom of the transmission. Oil pan. Okay, as an intermission feature, we're going to take a new oil separator and we're going to take the used oil separator out of that vehicle. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to weigh them. Okay, get this little scale here. Okay, let's do it in pounds. Okay, we can do it in pounds and kilograms. We'll keep everybody happy, okay? Okay, so in pounds, all right, 0.68 of a pound, brand new empty one. Okay, the identical housing. You see that? 1.75 pounds. Let's try it in. Okay, so we get that set at 0. Here's a brand new one. Put it on there. 310 grams. Okay. We got the old one, the one that's all plugged up. 794 grams. That's the difference. And let's do that in pounds and ounces, just for everybody else's sake. Okay. 11 ounces for the brand new one. 1 pound, 12 ounces for the full one. Okay. And what we're going to do for an extra added bonus is we're going to cut that in half and see what's inside of it. Oh, look at the chunk just spitting out of there. Look at that. Look at that mess. Wow. It's every bit as delicious as I thought it would be. Let's take a look in here. Okay. Let's see what's in here. Look at the stuff in there. Wow. I thought it would be more solid, but it's a liquidy mess. Okay. Check it out. Okay. Look at that stuff. Look at that. Look at that. The solids in there. Wow. Yeah, that's what happens to those. Is there any better example of why you should change that once in a while? And I guess by extension, change your oil often. Keep your oil clean. Change your oil often, and don't And don't let this happen. Look at that thing. And that oil's coming out of there. Okay, looking up from underneath at the pan, this is where your oil filter is, and we can just leave that right on the pan. That'll come off with the pan as part of it. So no need to make a mess by draining that oil filter out right now. And then we're just going to go around the perimeter. I think most all the bolts are 10mm heads on them. You can see them there. And there's a disconnection has to be made on the back here for the oil cooler. We'll get to that in a minute. And a couple of bolts that bolt the oil pan into the transmission. On this side here, there's one there, one on each side. And they look like, what are they, 14mm maybe? And they're all 10mm heads, and there's a couple that are longer. So just make sure that you make note of where the longer ones go. There's two long ones down on the end here a minute ago. And we've got most of that oil out of there now, so I'm gonna put the plug back in so I don't drip any on myself. I'll just show you up under here. Oh, first thing I'll show you are my blocks. I've got axle stands across the front, 2 of them. I also put blocks in, okay? Both sides. You want to make sure the vehicle's really secure before you get under here. There's no second chances. That thing slips on you. Now, so you're going to need a T30 Torx to take these out here. And there will be a little oil that comes out, because there's a pipe that comes from your oil filter here. The other one that leaves the cooler and goes up to the engine. So you expect a little bit of oil to come out of this seam here. Okay, some idea how many bolts are holding this thing up here. There's those 2 into the transmission I got to get yet. One there, one there. And I just got the bolts out of the oil cooler, and all I gotta do is get the pan under it and pop it off, and it'll leak some oil down. You getting that? Yeah, you're getting that. Okay, and that's the only bolt I really had any trouble to get to. And all I had to do was take those 2 lines that run along there, and they're sitting in clips. See the clip there? There's a clip on the other side, and they just pop out of the clip. I don't have to remove the line, just pop them out of their clips, and I can get an extension down in behind them. Okay, so I got all the bolts out of the pan except for the 2 that hold it to the transmission. Those are 14mm. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so as I approach that last bolt, that's just loose. You see how loose the pan is? It'll just drop right off there. Okay. Okay, there's that bolt out. Okay, here comes the pan. There it comes. Seems like everything's out, but maybe there's something. It seems like there might be something up at this other end that's not cooperating. Alright, here it comes. Okay. Okay. Must be something that's on over there. Okay, here it is. There it is. There's our first look up there in a long time. There's the pan. There it is. Very good. Huh. What was hanging me up was one little bolt in the side of the pan. See, there's a bracket hangs down there, right here. And There's a bolt in from the side there with a 10mm head on it. Once I got that free, out it came. I'm gonna let that drain out. I've just got it sitting in a pan for tonight. I'm gonna let all that oil drip out of it. We'll take a look tomorrow. And what I'm doing here is I'm comparing this pan with another one I took off of a 2004 XC70 with a 2.5T, and apparently they're the same engine. So I'm gonna, double check the pans because this one's already cleaned up inside and out. So if that's a go, if they're identical, I'll put the clean one back on the V70, and I'll save this one for a later date for the XC70. Okay, so here's that oil pan. And what I've done is I've just put some paint thinner in it, and just a little bit in the bottom. I've just been moving it around. I don't expect to get all the staining off the pan. It's just that I'm trying to loosen up, any deposits and anything that might be like sludge in the bottom and things like that. Now, this little opening right here. Now this little drain tube right here, you can see that it's holding fluid here, right? So that's supposed to be free right down to the bottom because it's open near the bottom of the pan. And that's the drain from the oil separator box on the side of the block. And I noticed when I took off the oil separator box, I noticed that passage was plugged in the block, and then it comes in and it runs down. And if that's not free, then what'll happen is it'll back up in the system. And you can see how that's been soaking for a few hours in the solvent. I'm going to open that up, and I couldn't get into there. I couldn't pass a stiff wire, like I had an extension cord pushed in, and it has to go through a 90-degree turn to get down into there. So I couldn't get it in and then push it down with enough force to clear it. And I tried to blow compressed air in the hole, and I couldn't get it to blow through either. So off came the pan. And luckily, with these Volvos, the pan, there's nothing under it. There's no cross member, so it came out. It's pretty much a straight drop. You don't have to move anything out of the way to get it off of there. So I'm still not to the bottom yet. Just let me get a rag, and let's examine this stuff as we go. Okay. Let's see what kind of junk we're getting off of there. And I still feel it's quite soft in the bottom. I'm not to the bottom yet, so that's been building up in there for quite some time. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's really caked solid. Yeah. I'm not to the bottom of the pan yet. Getting close though. Let's see. Let's take a measure here. Yeah. Getting close. Or pretty close. I think I'm at the pan now. I just went through. I just broke through the last bit of sludge. So yeah, if that's plugged, that's the only route for the oil out of that separator back into the sump. It doesn't just come in and just drain from the top, into the sump. It has to run down through that tube. I'm just wondering, does it have to exit at the very bottom of this tube? I wonder what happened if I drilled a hole in this pipe. Just drilled a hole about here, right through, a 3/8 hole, down here, and the oil would get into the pan then. But does that disturb the, how it's introduced? Maybe the way this works is those return oil has to be introduced to the oil below the surface, and if you introduce it up here, that might introduce crankcase gas back up into the separator and work backwards. Like the way it works normally is crankcase pressure is going to come out the top of the engine with any vapor. The vapor gets separated, the oil drains back in here, and the vapors that don't contain so much oil are burned on the intake stream of the engine. So maybe if the oil gets let out, you know, above the oil level in the pan, then it messes the system up. That's the only reason I can see for this tube being all the way to the bottom. And I haven't found any place where this is really well explained. You know, I've seen countless videos and read stuff about how this has to be free, but I haven't had anybody really explain the system any better than that. The other thing is these baffles in the pan, I don't think they're removable, so you can't really get down there. I could be wrong about that. Maybe they do pop out. They must put them in there somehow, but I don't know if they're meant to be taken out. I'd like to get right down to the bottom and clean around it, but it might just have to be done with solvent and compressed air. There. Oh, look at that. It's still backing up. Look at that. It's still holding a level. No wonder that gets jammed up. And if that was free, that would just pour right through. It wouldn't hold it, you know, that wouldn't hold the liquid back. Look at that. Oh, it is draining back. Now it is going through a little bit, yeah. Okay, it's not trying to hold a level anymore. Okay, we're winning. But it's, yeah. That might be I don't know, an engineering mistake in the design of this pan. I'm gonna piss somebody off by saying that. The Volvo purists, but oh well. There's got to be a reason that they did it that way, but a lot of stuff doesn't make sense to me, and I don't mind saying it doesn't make any sense to me. Oh well. If you can explain, let me know in the comments, please. I'd love to hear the explanation for why that is. Trying to run the screwdriver into all the corners. Okay, and my plan here is to just brush everything with the paint thinner and let it soak. Okay, so it's the next day. Here's the pan I took out yesterday. This is off the 2001 V70, the 2.4 liter turbocharged engine. And this is the pan I took off another car. This is a 2004 XC70 with a 2.5T engine. But the oil pans are the same. Those blocks are, I think, almost identical. There's some minor differences between the engines, but not a heck of a lot. And these pans have the same part number. So this one I've got all cleaned up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this pan on the V70, and I'll save this one for the XC70 because that may not be going back together, that other engine. It's got some internal issues, and we'll talk about that in another video. But I've looked at it, all the holes and everything, they're all identical, all the fixtures are the same. The only thing I see that's different between the pan off the XC70 and the V70 is right here. There's a dimple in this little baffle that isn't over here, but if I put my fingers under there, there's nothing there. There's nothing to mate with it, or who knows what it's there for. But other than that, it's for all intents and purposes, it's the identical pan, and it'll bolt right up there. So because it's clean inside and out, maybe that doesn't look clean to you, but it wasn't acid bath or anything, but I cleaned it quite thoroughly with solvents and brushes, and so I've got everything out of that one. So we're going to put that one in and set this one aside. We've decided we're going to use the cleaned out pan, but what I want to do before we move on is I want to look and see if this one was blocked up at all. And so what I've got here is I've just got a bolt, and I'm going to put it down in here, And I feel a little bit of sludge on the sides, but nothing too heavy. And you may not be able to see it here, but I can see the end of that bolt right through here in that U-shaped fitting. So this passage wasn't plugged completely on this engine. It was still open. Okay, so like I say, that'll get cleaned to a greater degree when I do that pan. Okay, so we're going to move on with this pan here, and that's where your oil cooler sits on the back. And there's 2 new seals here. There's a seal you're going to need here and here. And the other thing you got to do with these pans, they don't have a gasket. They don't have a traditional gasket, and they don't use a lot of heavy sealant either. It's a machine flat surface, and what you do is you clean this up, and you clean up the mating surface on the block. And what you use is what's called anaerobic sealant. You can get this anywhere. Anaerobic sealant hardens in the absence of oxygen. So in the tube, you'll always find, you know, when you buy these things, it seems like it's only half full, but that's because if it was completely full, it would harden because it needs a bit of oxygen in contact with it to keep it soft. When it goes into a place like this and gets squished down against the block, there's no oxygen in there, and it'll harden. Okay, so what you do is once this is cleaned up, and then I'm going to do that with a light scraper and some brake cleaner, and we'll dry it off. And before we put the sealant on, what you do is you put the sealant. I've got a scrap of tile here, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a quantity of the sealant on a piece of tile, and I've got a little foam roller here, and I will use the foam roller to apply it. So it's not very thick, right? You put it on there, and then while it's still tacky, you know, you can put it in place without moving the pan, you know, twisting it back and forth like this on it too much. Just see if you can get it straight up in there, and that's how that's done. So it's, you know, it's quite a different oil pan gasket than some people might be used to. I haven't taken that filter off there yet. Get that cleaned out. There's the old one, and there's the new Wix filter. Okay. Like that. And it comes with a new O-ring, but I think this O-ring's okay. I just changed that a couple of months ago. It's nice and clean. Don't want to go too tight. Just want to snug it up. And there, it's on the O-ring, it's fine. Good. Okay, so I got this flange cleaned. I'm just going to spray it with some brake cleaner. Okay, so looking up under the block, this surface, we're going to just scrape gently any of these deposits off from the old adhesive. And there's two seals for the oil. There's one that goes in this recess here. I've got them pulled out now, but there's one that goes here and there's one that goes here. That came in the kit. And we're going to drop the oil pickup tube, and there's a new seal that goes between that and the block up in here. Okay, I just loosened these two bolts that hold the oil pickup line. I'm going to bring that down. Okay. Okay. I just took a very fine piece of emery and I just gently went across that outside surface of the pan. Not to dig into it at all, just to remove any of that varnish that's on there from that last bit of adhesive. And now I'm just going to spray it off with some brake cleaner. Now I feel a lot better about, you know, using a little bit of emery cloth on the bottom of the pan like that, on the bottom of the engine like that. And if the engine was turned over, I wouldn't want to use it because it would, you know, those little bits of sand off the paper are going to end up down in the engine. But this way here, they'll come straight back. I have the pickup tube from the other engine all clean, so I'm going to use that one. And I'm just going to bolt that back up in there. And there's a seal, a new seal that goes right on here. I'll show you that in a second. Okay, so here's the pickup tube. Here's a new seal. And I'm going to put that down on there. Now we'll just pick up one little drop of oil off the bottom of the engine to lubricate that with, like so. All right. Okay, and then that goes right up in there. And line up the bolt holes like that. I'm just going to put a little bit of grease on that seal, enough to hold it up in there until we get the pan up in there. Okay, so it's got a bit of grease on it. I'll just tuck it up in there like that. Easier said than done. And there it is. And a good bit of grease on that should hold it until we get the pan up in place. We'll double check that at the last thing before we put the pan up, but a bit of grease on there should hold it. Okay, same with this little one. We'll do the same thing. Let's see here. Okay, that's good. They're both in there. Very good. And I've cleaned up the surface here on my oil cooler, the face of it here. Now this particular kit didn't come with new oil seals for the cooler. Those are a separate kit, but I took the ones that came with it out and cleaned them up, and they're fine. They're going to be just fine. There was no leak here anyway, so I mean, if there was a leak later, you know, here this is easy to get to. It's just 4 bolts, and this comes off the side of the pan. You know, I wouldn't have to drop the pan to fix those, but I think that's going to be fine. Reusing those ones, and okay. That's all good. There's a few little drips of oil that have to be done at the last minute here. But, okay, let's go get that sealant on the pan and set that up here. I'll just put a bit of that on the surface. Okay. Okay, so once you've got a nice coating on there, there's no rush to put the pan in because that sealant isn't going to cure out in oxygen. It's going to cure once it's cinched down. So you can take your time. I like a nice even coat, even a little heavier than what we got on there right now. A little bit more. Okay, the bottom of the block is spotless. It's all been wiped off several times with brake cleaner. And I've got the small O-ring with grease on it, holding it up into place, and the large one there. A new seal on the pickup tube, and that's all bolted down tight. All right, one last look in here, and we'll lift the pan up in there. Looking good. There it is. Okay, it's up in place. Let's get that second bolt in place, and then the pressure's off. Okay, so I got all the bolts tight around the perimeter of the pan. I got these bolts going into the transmission. They're snug. And I put the oil cooler back on here. Wiped everything off. I tucked these lines that I had pulled out of those brackets back into their clips over here. And everything looks good. And one last step before we fill it up with oil is to put the dipstick tube in. Okay, so the last thing to do here is put in the dipstick tube. I put a new seal on here. I'm going to put a little drop of oil on it. And I got to feed it down through here and guide it into the pan, and then it bolts on here. So that may not be able to be captured on film so easily because I can't even see it. Because I can't even see it myself down there. I'll have to go down below and well, let's try. Let's take a look down there. Let's see if we can get. Okay. I see it right here. I just got to steer it. No, it's going to take two hands, but you get the general idea. We'll check back in a second when I've got it stuck in this spot here for it on the pan. Okay, so it's home down in the pan, and I've bolted it on the top and put the dipstick in it, so that's done. I've gone around and checked all the bolts. Everything's tight, and the bolts are tight on the oil cooler, and the drain plug for the pan is tight. And everything's looking good down here. Time to put some oil in it. What I've been using on this engine is this Mobile full synthetic 5W30. Working good so far. Sometimes I add about a half a liter of Lucas heavy duty oil stabilizer. However, today I went and looked at my bottle and it's empty. So it's okay. I'm just going to go with full synthetic 5W30 for today. And I might add a little Lucas later. Volvo is very fussy about their oil. They recommend not to use any additives whatsoever. Probably because of that PCV system that has that narrow tube in it into the sump that can get clogged. And mind you, these recommendations are 20 years old because it's a 20-year-old car. You know, there's a lot of new advances have happened in oil since then. But just as a matter of course, on old vehicles, I always add a half of liter of Lucas heavy duty oil stabilizer to the engine oil on each oil change. So I haven't had trouble with that, and I've gotten almost 600,000 kilometers, which would be about, what, 400,000 miles out of one old Chevy engine. I got a Ford engine right now pushing the heck out of 350,000 miles on it, and it's running good. So okay, that should be good enough to start it. I think it holds about 6 quarts. And there's the top of the dipstick tube bolted down here. And there it is. Running great. Oh yeah, and I forgot to say one thing. What the heck was it? No. It is. If you haven't already subscribed, just look down there at the bottom. There's a little subscribe button, or underneath the video, you can click subscribe. It doesn't cost anything. The videos that I produce will come up in your feed the next time you log into YouTube. And that's all it is. There's no fees, there's no cost. You get to see all the crazy stuff I get up to, and the things I fix, and whatever else. So I'd love to have you along. Click subscribe, doesn't cost a thing, and we'll see you again here very soon on Everyday Projects. Bye for now.